These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer healthcare, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide healthcare to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. It's the end of the week, and it's Anything Goes Friday. We have no guests today. It's just you and me, my favorite kind of show. Say that again? Oh, excuse me, we do have a guest, Joe Madison. That's right. In the second hour, Joe is going to drop by. Joe is going to be involved in a very consequential march on Washington, D.C. tomorrow, and we'll tell you all about that in the second hour. My apologies to Joe for my brain fart there. Anyhow, so that's our day. Our telephone number, 202-808-9925. It's Anything Goes Friday, whatever you want to talk about. My op-ed today that I wrote the first draft of yesterday afternoon. I typically write these in the afternoon between around 1 and 5 or 6 p.m. And then this morning, when Louise and I got up at 5:30, I turned on the TV, and twice while I was listening to TV, I heard people say, commentators on TV say, do we have to worry that Afghanistan is going to become another hotbed of terrorism that will be used to attack America? And I'm like, that's the wrong question. Afghanistan had little or nothing to do with 9/11. 9/11 was the bin Laden apparently wrote the check. Where'd he get the money? He got the money from Ronald Reagan in Saudi Arabia. Not a penny of this came from anybody in Afghanistan. No Afghan national, no Afghan government. They had nothing to do with the planning of 9/11. They had nothing to do with the payment for 9/11. They didn't know 9/11 happened. 9/11 was executed by 15 Saudis, a guy from Egypt, a guy from Lebanon, and there were two other people. I think they were Yemenis. I'm not sure. Oh, they were citizens of the United Arab Emirates. That's right. Two from the UAE. Not a single Afghan was involved in 9/11. Oh, but wasn't bin Laden running a terrorist training camp in Afghanistan? Yes, just like the Michigan militia runs them, you know, in northern Michigan, where a bunch of yahoos get together, pay their $50 fee, and go out in the woods and shoot up trees. That had nothing to do with 9/11. But wasn't the planning for 9/11 done in Afghanistan? No, it was done in Hamburg, Germany. And then what would you call him? A courier, I guess, is the word, from Germany traveled down to Afghanistan just before 9/11 to tell bin Laden, hey, it's going to happen. Bin Laden at that point knew none of the operational details. That was all handled by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed out of Pakistan and Hamburg, Germany. And then they sent these Saudi hijackers to the United States, legally, by the way. They all came in on tourist visas. Actually, I think a couple of them came in on educational visas. We want to learn how to be pilots. And Mohammed Atta was down in Venice, Florida, along with a couple of the other guys, learning how to be a pilot. So it was planned in Germany. The final planning was done in Florida. Bin Laden at the time was in Pakistan getting blood transfusions because his kidneys were failing. And we decided to attack Afghanistan? Really? Because we said, oh, 9/11 came from Afghanistan. But doesn't the Taliban hate America? The Taliban doesn't give a rat's ass about America if we would just stay the hell out of their country. Afghanistan fought off the Turks. They fought off the Mongol hordes. They fought off the Catholics. They fought off the Persians. They fought off the British. They fought off the Soviets. Well, I thought the Taliban wanted to create a worldwide... No, you're thinking of ISIS. ISIS wants to reestablish the caliphate across southern Europe, the Middle East, and northern Africa. That's ISIS. That's who, by the way, blew up the bombs yesterday that killed the people in Afghanistan. It wasn't the Taliban. The Taliban was trying to provide security. They want to run a country. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Taliban. They're throwbacks to the 12th century. But they're not the ones who attacked us on 9/11. George Bush and Dick Cheney would like you to think that. Because, hey, you know, if we're going to have a war to try to get reelected in 2004, why not have a war against a country where the average income is $2 a day, where there's no Air Force to speak of, and where their army is a joke? Let's take on that country. Sort of like just, you know, a little earlier when the humiliating explosion happened in Lebanon that killed over 100 U.S. Marines, as I recall, during the Reagan administration. What was Reagan's response? Let's invade Grenada. Remember? Bin Laden was very clear about why he attacked the United States. It had nothing to do with Afghanistan. He attacked the United States. He told us in 1996 that he was going to do this. Because back in the early 90s, when George Herbert Walker Bush was president of the United States, and he thought having a little war, just like Ronald Reagan had his little war in Grenada, and it helped him get reelected in 1984, maybe if we have a little war in, say, Iraq, just a 3-day war, just a little war, it'll help us get reelected in 1992. And so Bush did it. But in order to get the weapons and the airplanes into Iraq, they needed a staging base for that war. So he talked Saudi Arabia into, for the first time, letting Americans take over the Bin Sultan Air Force Base and a Saudi Air Force Base. And we never left. Or at least we didn't. I'll tell you when we left in just a second. But so we took over this Air Force Base in Saudi Arabia. And Osama bin Laden, and by the way, a significant chunk of the Saudi population, bin Laden was not alone in this. Bin Laden was expressing an opinion that was held by fundamentalists across the region, particularly in Saudi Arabia, was saying, wait a minute, the war is over. It lasted 3 days. Get your people the hell out of here. You've got men who are watching porn and drinking alcohol on sacred Saudi soil. And you've got women who are showing their elbows and driving cars and probably having sex with the men without being married. They're certainly not covering their faces on sacred Saudi soil. Get the hell out of our country. In 1996, bin Laden said, this is September 2nd, 1996, we are going to launch a guerrilla war against American forces and expel the infidels from the Arabian Peninsula. End quote. 2 years later, in 1998, bin Laden met privately with a reporter for The Guardian. Quote, we believe we are the men, Muslim men, committed to defending the grandest house in the universe. The holy Saudi Kaaba land is an honor to die and defend. So this is our aim, to liberate the lands of Islam, of Saudi Arabia, from the sinners. End quote. The next year, in a letter to America that was published in the New York Times, Osama bin Laden wrote, quote, your forces occupy our country. You spread your military bases throughout it. You corrupted our lands. You besiege our sanctities. You protect the security of the Jews and to ensure the continuity of your pillage of our treasures. End quote. 9/11 was all about bin Laden saying, get the hell out of Saudi Arabia. And by the way, right after 9/11, guess what President George W. Bush did? He pulled all the American forces out of Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden got exactly what he asked for. And it's not like this was a surprise. Richard Clark, the security advisor for President Clinton, came on this program back in 2002. Or maybe it was 2003. Whatever it was. It must have been 2003, because that's when we started our show in March of 2003. Came on this program and said, I personally told Condoleezza Rice that bin Laden was going to strike the United States if we didn't get out of it, out of that Air Force base in Saudi Arabia. And I know that Al Gore told that to Dick Cheney, and I know that Bill Clinton told that to George W. Bush, and they basically laughed at us. So why does the media keep saying, oh, gee, if we leave Afghanistan, there's going to be terrorism attacking the United States, when it was never that in the first place? Well, because it's a convenient story that gives Bush and Cheney cover. They wanted a war for re-election purposes, and they got their war. It's that simple. And the war, by the way, was over in fewer than 3 weeks. That's how long it took to take down the Taliban government. And then we started a 20-year occupation, and don't get me started all about that. But this all goes back to Pappy Bush's war that he lied us into, by the way. There were no babies being thrown out of incubators. That was a stunt put together by an American PR firm with a princess from a former Kuwaiti princess testified, lying to the United States Congress, saying they're throwing babies out of incubators, those nasty Iraqi soldiers. George Herbert Walker Bush wanted to lie us into a little war so he could get himself reelected. In doing so, he put soldiers in Saudi Arabia, pissed off Osama bin Laden, and he struck us on 9/11. Let's tell the friggin' truth about what happened. I mean, if the media is going to ask questions, they need to ask the right questions. Here are my 3 nominees. You can add whatever you want, and then it's anything goes Friday, other than, Joe dropping by. Number 1. How did Bush and Cheney get away with lying us into a war and a 20-year occupation of Afghanistan and nearly that long in Iraq without political or historic consequences? Number 2, why did the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations, 3 administrations, 2 Republican, 1 Democratic, why did they, all knowing that these occupations were a lost cause and a waste of American blood and treasure, why didn't they get us out before now? And number 3, what can we do in the Middle East and elsewhere around the world, if that is our goal, to promote peace, modernity, and democratic values without using warplanes, drones, soldiers, and bombs? When we start asking those questions, when we start having that conversation, then America will have grown up. But right now, we're still stuck in this infantile stage where we are giving an absolute pass to George W. Bush and Dick Cheney for lying to us, for their war crimes, for their torture, for everything else. And somehow the Republicans are turning the outcome of these lies into a political problem for Joe Biden, for God's sake, who's just trying to clean up the mess that was left in by 3 previous presidents that was started by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Let's tell the truth about this. Damn it, let's do it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. If you want all the details and the hot links and everything, it's all over at hartmannreport.com. Today's rant. And welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Jeremy in Indianapolis. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I believe that scientists could certainly learn a lot more about human mentality by studying how we behave in video games. And there's some behaviors anecdotally that I was wondering, I'd like your thoughts on them, kind of, as well as anybody else who's out there's thoughts on them. One thing I've noticed is that, video games back in the day used to be slower, more intellectual, partly because computers weren't as fast as they are now, but also because nerds were the ones, making them for nerds.
I know. I wrote a video game for the kids in our community for abused kids back in 1980. It ran on a TRS-80 Model 3. It was written in BASIC. 4 pages of BASIC code. That's how I learned BASIC. But anyhow, it was very simple. It was like a treasure hunt,
Mm-hmm.
And it was full of if-thens,
Yeah, I actually started with QBasic, but I did stuff in BASIC as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed is like the most popular PC games out there tend to be ones that are reflex-based, but also not just that, but they tend to be ones where people can jump into a team semi-anonymously. And you play these like MOBA games, they're called. I don't know if you've heard of them, or and some of the first.
I'm really out of touch with this. Yeah, so
it's fine. But basically, you join a team of random people, and then what happens is if you win, well, you're the most awesome player there was. You totally carried the team. You're the best guy ever. But if you lose, well, it's not my fault. My team was terrible. I didn't do anything wrong. And I think that exposes something with human mentality. If in general, like with things with like global warming and COVID right now and everything else in the world, that it's like I jump in, we win, I'm awesome, but we lose, well, it's not my fault.
It's also not a reflection of reality, Jeremy. I mean, if anybody who's ever participated in a team sport, or in the military, gets it that the team. Your life depends on the team, and the team's life depends on you. And you guys are as interconnected and interrelated, assuming that you're facing some sort of really serious mission, as our family.
Yeah, but you're not anonymous when you're like on a soccer field
it's the exact
or on
opposite of being
American
anonymous.
Football field.
It's like you're integrated into, you're knit into that group. That's the whole point of the team.
But when we're a country or the world and we're facing things like global warming or a pandemic, are you really part of the team or are you just an anonymous
your argument
member?
Is that modern video games are increasing individual isolation and increasing the mentality that society, Margaret Thatcher's old thing, there's no such thing as society, there's only a collection of individuals, that we don't have responsibility for each other.
Well, it's certainly exposing it, if not increasing it. And I do wonder if it is increasing it or not.
Thesis.
Yeah, and there's one more, if I got a moment, which is you were speaking before about savior mentality. Savior is going to come and save us mentality. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that the consequences of the video games have also gone down. And people aren't, they're playing video games, they don't face real consequences. And then when they're in reality, of course, has real consequences, but are we really prepared for that as well as we used to be as a people?
Interesting.
So, yep, thank you.
Jeremy, thought-provoking stuff. Thank you. Remarkable. The things people are thinking about that are really consequential. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Hey, we have a new video out about the 1776 Commission. Remember this commission that Donald Trump put together to explain the history of America, to have true principles, because history is being distorted by things like the New York Times 1619 report, you know. No, seriously, this is what Donald Trump said, that, you know, we're engaging now in revisionist history by highlighting the history of slavery in the United States. And so he put together this bizarre commission, and now in the state of South Carolina, Senator Dwight Loftus and others have introduced legislation requiring that Trump's commission, which had no historians on it, 18 people, not a single historian, that commission's findings be taught as history in the public schools in South Carolina. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, it's like they want to take us back to the 1930s. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. So, Anything Goes Friday. I've got a few other stories that I'm going to share with you as we continue through the day about Wisconsin cops compiling lists of left-wing protesters, anti-vax. My colleague on SiriusXM, Michelangelo Signorelli, has an interesting take on how to deal with anti-vaxxers. I'll tell you about that. And COVID-19 is disappearing from the dashboards in various states. We'll get into that, too. So I've got a few stories to share with you as we go through the day. But like I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. Let's pick up your phone calls here. Russ in Hickory Hills, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, you know, I've been listening to these people, and Stephanie Miller brought up something. Where were the big chicken hawks when Ronald Reagan let 261 Marines get blown apart? Right?
Not only did the chicken hawks scatter, but, you know, it was just a few weeks later that he invaded Grenada, and all of a sudden the media forgot about it, too.
Because you know why? All of a sudden you got Devin Nunes out there calling him a horse's rear end. They want him to resign. And even Newsmax said, who are you talking about? That's the President of the United States. I think, Tom, we're going to have to loosen our tongue because this idiot Trump, he said he wiped out ISA, and the guy replied by saying, then who killed these 13 people and 18 wounded 18? They're ghosts?
Yeah.
I mean, we have allowed too much lying going on, Tom. 261 by Ronald Reagan. I never hear anybody bringing that up. 3,000 with Bush with the 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom, we've got to start pushing back. I mean, they're getting away with murder.
That's the whole point of my rant today, Russ, is that, you know, we're asking the wrong questions. We're completely forgetting our history. I don't think most Americans realize why bin Laden struck the United States, although he told us three different times to the New York Times.
Shirts.
Say what?
They didn't wear veils, right? And short-sleeve shirts, and they were smoking.
It was American women on the Bin Sultan Air Force Base in Saudi Arabia. That's why he struck us. He wanted Americans out of Saudi Arabia. He was a fundamentalist freak, and he considered it holy land, and we were defiling it. That was his argument.
So if somebody calls you again a right-winger, should we start talking about Beirut with 261 on Ronald Reagan and let them get away with it? Should we start pushing that?
It's gone down the very, very far down the memory hole, Russ, sadly.
Well, I know. That's the problem, because you asked Trump last night, remember? He just said he wiped out ISA. Like the guy said, who killed these people?
Yeah, Trump lies through his teeth. You know, he just lies through his teeth. It's what he does. Russ, thanks for the call. I'm with you. It's time to start telling the truth. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls right after this. For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention riot girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So, you know, we have our regular newsletter that you can find over at thomhartmann.com that has Sue's Daily Stack in it, which lists a link to every article, every story that I talked about on, you know, whatever it may be on the program that day. And then there's also my daily rant, which can come into your email box. No advertisements, no cost, over at hartmannreport.com. In addition to that, we have a weekly video that we post over at thomhartmann.com for people who, you know, are supporters of our program. And the one this week is particularly fascinating. A federal judge has said that Betsy DeVos has to come in and sit for a 3-hour deposition. Now, the Biden Justice Department said former cabinet secretary shouldn't have to do this. And the judge said, no, the record keeping was so shoddy during the Trump administration. So what's up next? Well, let's hope it's Bill Barr being dragged before a court. You can check it all out at thomhartmann.com. Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Thomas in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Thomas, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. My daughter teaches 5th grade in South Florida. I'm not going to mention any school districts or the school. And she required that the students wore masks. Mm-hmm. And apparently it got leaked out, and she was sat down by the superintendent and in a basic roundabout way told her that if she didn't discontinue this procedure, that her job was in jeopardy.
Jeez. Thomas, did you see the news this morning that a judge just ruled that DeSantis' order that you can't mandate masks is unconstitutional?
No, I missed that. Let me finish this story, though, because it gets bizarre. My son-in-law, who is a chimpanzee, her husband, would not get the shot. I mean, won't wear a mask. None of that. Fortunately, my daughter and granddaughters have both had the shots. Well, he last week went on a respirator, and yesterday he passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Thomas.
Well, I am too. But here's the irony of it. She sent out, you know, the invitations to the funeral and everything, and she had 2 requirements. That if you came to the church, you had to prove that you were vaccinated and wear a mask. Right. And if you went to the funeral, you just had to wear a mask. And all his running buddies, you know, same attitude as him, you know, no vaccination, I got my liberties, yada, yada, yada. Right. So that just kind of blew me away. So we're going to find out what's happening on that.
So your daughter is dealing with having dealt with the horrors of losing her husband because he was indoctrinated by this cult, is now being abused by the cult members. Is that the deal, Thomas?
Yeah, pretty much. I call them his Trump-pansy buddies, you know, and she's the total opposite. But here's something that maybe you can get some advice. My granddaughter came up with this, you know, the MAGA hats and T-shirts and all that. she said, "Why don't we come up with Maha?" I go, "What's that?" She goes, "Make America Hate Again." And print up the T-shirts and the hats. And like before, I did a thing on hats for Trump back when he was running. It had a secret message on it that basically said, "Thank God I'm white." And all that proceeds, and along with these proceeds for the hats and T-shirts, I donate to Free Speech TV.
How about Make America Healthy Again, Thomas? If we're going to do MAHA.
Yeah, well,
but I get it. You're trying to find something that you can sell to the people you call the Trump pansies.
Well,
yeah,
that, and also maybe the people leaning more to the left, maybe the Republicans or the right will see, Maha,
yeah.
And then realize that it's Make America Hate Again.
Yeah. But see, I think they're down with that already. I mean, that's what Donald Trump has been selling all along. I get it.
Yeah.
Thomas, I have to move along, but thank you for the call. I'm very sorry to hear that you lost your son-in-law. I mean, it's just because somebody gets sucked into a cult doesn't make them an evil person, and they certainly don't deserve to die for it. It's
yes, sir, that's true.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on maybe the Maha.
Yeah, I'm inclined to just like walk away from those guys, and not give them any more energy. But that's just me. I can't advise you on this, Thomas. But thank you for the call.
I'm not a rich guy, and I like to donate to Free Speech TV when I can, and that's my way of doing it.
There you go. Well, okay, I'm all in favor of that, as I'm a big fan of Free Speech TV. Thomas, thank you for the call. Patrick in East Lansing, Michigan. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. I was hoping you could raise the profile of the new crisis we face as of yesterday's U.S. Supreme Court decision.
Oh, you're talking about the eviction moratorium that they struck down?
Yes, and I wanted to tell you that I thought the attention that we need to focus on is why we're in this crisis right now, and the Congress solved the crisis by appropriating $47 billion.
Right.
And David Dayen in the American Prospect, August 4th, did a masterful article, and he said that the law was designed not to work and it's put millions at risk. The number of renters facing eviction today, who President Biden said would have their money, only 6% of the people eligible got their money. 6 million renters faced eviction when the moratorium was put back into effect, but that's households. There's roughly 2.8 persons per household. That's 18 million people, roughly, 2/3 of whom are children. And only 10% of the people eligible have applied. What David Dayen said is that if you look carefully at how this was designed, it was basically designed to fail. It's like a Rube Goldberg scheme with chutes and ladders that makes it impossible for the tenant to get their money. So the big question is, forget about the U.S. Supreme Court's hypocrisy where they rushed in and they protected the landlords, and they have, in many cases, allowed executive power, imperial presidential power in every area we can imagine. And only in this one area where property rights are at stake did they choose to limit it and require a law from Congress subject to the Senate filibuster. That's all hypocrisy on the part of this very right-wing court, when in our country we've had price controls under Nixon and FDR. We've had eviction moratoriums before. We've had bank moratoriums. This is a radical right-wing, pre-New Deal kind of property rights ruling. But the real source of this problem is Congress, and even Pramila Jayapal and others in the Progressive Caucus have admitted that in the compromise, this was basically designed to fail. Just like Obamacare, which couldn't get the Medicaid money to the states, that refused to take it. So it says in the text, as David Dayen says, the federal government can't administer it. Then it says that the states can't disperse it. Then it says that the landlord can reject the money. Well, Janet Yellen stepped in because this affects mortgage lenders, and it affects a whole bunch of things in our economy, and she tried to make it so that landlords couldn't reject it, and that's all trying to get worked out at the federal level. But the state clearly can't disperse it, so they have to invent a whole scheme at the local level, and there's no advertisement. The Urban Institute did a study as of the first week of July, when only $3 billion of $47 billion had been in the hands of tenants and landlords.
And nobody even knew it was there. I know.
50% of tenants didn't know, and the landlords didn't know. We're dealing with this here in Michigan, but every state's dealing with it, because if you're the person going to take the money, you have to go through this incredibly complicated scheme and satisfy 5 threshold criteria, which businesses didn't have to satisfy.
And in some states, you have to show up in person to do it, by the way. I mean, because it's up to...
Or you have to fill out an online form when you don't have online access because of our digital divide.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's the infuriating thing. The landlords took this pandemic relief money, and now they're double dipping to get a windfall by getting rid of people. And one of the places they're doing it is in these trailer parks. And National Public Radio featured a lady right over here in Swartz Creek, Michigan, who was doing an Uber taxi because we don't have enough ambulances to get sick people to the hospital. She got sick. She was off for a month. She developed an arrearage. She desperately needed to get her money to avoid being evicted, lose the equity in her trailer, her 6 cats, all her belongings, go to the street in the rain. And she had applied, but we have a 45-day deadline once they file to evict you. And it was a large company that owns these trailer parks all over the country. They knew she was applying. They were racing to evict her to get to the 45 days, and she couldn't get the state to act. And until NPR did a feature story on how they're doing this all over the country to make a windfall, did they get them to back off and say, well, wait until the rental assistance is processed. Amazing. And the landlord benefits from getting the money. So the question is, can government work? And if Democrats want to have a vision that government can work, but they want to leave their core base voter demographic stranded in the thing they care about more than anything, which is to have a house in which they've got a roof over their head and their kids can go to their same school, and we can't make this program work, it's going to be the rot that makes it impossible to sell progressive programs.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, and I'm guessing that you will find, whether it's conservative Democrats, the Kurt Schraders of the world, or whether it's Republicans, I'm guessing you'll find some of their hands behind this legislation. It's like the same people that tried to, who drilled the 20% hole in Medicare. Yeah, I'm with you, Patrick.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And then the Supreme Court last night just whipped out the knife and just stuck it in people's backs. I mean, it's just so wrong. We'll be back. Welcome back. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to if I might, take some liberties here. All of your shows for the half dozen years, I've been an ardent fan of yours and a student of yours, have been fantastic. But one of my favorites was one you did a few days ago on PTSD and the things that people in this country are going through. And it was kind of spiritualistic, and I really enjoyed that program and all of the participants. I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you.
Now I need to kind of move to the dark side. I've mentioned on your program before that in the United States, its populace always talks about the what, never the why. For instance, we got to build a great, big, beautiful wall because the drugs are coming in. But we never ask the question, why is this a society that needs to be loaded all the time? We don't ask the questions. If there's no appetite for the drugs, then the drugs can't be sold. And you and I have a kind of synergy, it seems, at times. And this morning, you really addressed that. When you talked about bin Laden and 9/11. And the question that needs to be asked is not all of this, my hair's on fire about these unfortunate casualties yesterday in Kabul, but why was the U.S. attacked on 9/11? What is it, Tom, that would motivate a person to be so angry, to place explosives on their person, to exact revenge? It is not inherent in people to want to kill themselves. You don't see 5-year-olds killing themselves. You don't see them committing suicide. And so I say to the people in the United States, And I'm not a religious person at all. But, there's wisdom everywhere. In the book of Matthew, in the Bible, I believe it's Matthew, it says, before you attempt, and I'm paraphrasing, to take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the plank out of your own so that you can better see that.
It's from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew, yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to these, and I think, I'm a bit of a word nerd, and I'm listening to the mainstream media, and they're talking about good guys and bad guys. And listen, you come into my backyard, you kill my women and children, you kill my neighbors, I got an issue with you.
Yep.
If those same things that the United States does across the world, around the world, were to happen here, imagine what would happen. Look at what China does. China goes, and the objective, Tom, may be the same. They may be after resources or whatever, but they go and they build infrastructure in Africa. They build roads. And somehow the United States has such hubris and arrogance that it thinks it can bomb everyone into submission.
And China, by the way, learned that from us with the Marshall Plan.
Exactly.
It's like we knew this once, Kenyatta. There was a time when we weren't stupid.
What happened?
I think the Republicans took over.
Listen, we do not own the world.
You bet. Yeah, very well said. Kenyatta, great rant. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's always nice to hear from you, my friend. We will be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We try to have a lot of content over at ThomHartmann.com, and of course every day my daily rant goes up at HartmannReport.com. No advertising, no fee or anything like that. You can even get it pushed out to your email box for free. But we also have, podcasts available that are free through wherever your favorite podcast provider may be, or the full 3-hour program. It's a 1-hour podcast, the one that's free out there. There's also the 3-hour podcast available at ThomHartmann.com. And we have a special video this week for supporters of the Thom Hartmann Program. It's over at ThomHartmann.com about the 62 worst members of the U.S. House of Representatives and Josh Hawley in the Senate. These are the people who voted against the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which passed the Senate and the House overwhelmingly. But these 62 members of the House did what is just awful. You can check it out at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Jonathan in Sharon, Wisconsin. Hey, Jonathan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. So I just wanted to talk about the COVID vaccines that are going out. And, at this point, I'm sick of these anti-vaxxers. They're posing a danger to us. And, all the propaganda and the misinformation going around, it's just ridiculous. And I think it's about time that, we have to do something about it. The
like
Delta
what?
variant is spreading, and I think they've had more than enough time, and we've been nice, but now we gotta do something about it. I really admire what Australia is doing, and like I said, they've had enough time, and we've been playing nice, and I think their time's up.
The thing that people forget, and nobody in the media much wants to talk about it because it sounds too much like catastrophism, and I'll qualify this statement by saying the odds of this happening are very low, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, and frankly, I don't think this is something that we particularly need to worry about. But let us not forget that the SARS-CoV virus is the same family as the original SARS virus that had a 50% fatality rate, and the same family as the MERS virus, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome SARS virus, which has about a 20% fatality rate. Right now, we're dealing with a virus that has a 1 to 3% fatality rate. But it's like this, we are so playing with fire. And when we try to keep these patents locked down so that poor countries can't simply make their own vaccines and protect their own people, this whole TRIPS waiver thing that we've had, what's her name, Lori Garrett, no, not Lori Garrett, Lori from Trade Watch. Yeah, you're having the same brain fart I am, Sean. Wallach, thank you. Lori Wallach, there you go. We've had Lori Wallach on this program at least a half a dozen times talking about this. There's a way where these companies that develop these vaccines can continue to get rich, they can continue to get paid. It just won't be quite as much as they have right now by giving a waiver to countries that have the capacity to manufacture vaccines. There are countries in Africa, in India, in China that have the capacity to manufacture these vaccines. They can't do it because of our patent and copyright laws, and our patent laws specifically. We need to vaccinate the world, and we need to take it on as a major project, because if this thing gets worse, it's not like there's not a precedent. MERS and the original SARS are terrible precedents for this.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say is, you're right. We're playing with fire. And like I said, I really admire what Australia is doing.
Yeah.
Some people say it's tyrannical, but this virus is going to be tyrannical.
They're not putting up with it anymore. They are isolating people. They are jailing people. They are fining people. They are saying that's it. Enough already. Enough. Amen. Jonathan, thank you for the call. Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin. Last minute here. What's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing? I'm calling with my 9/11 Truth World Peace hat on today, and I want to go back to maybe ask that you look at the original Cheney meeting early on in the Bush presidency, where he got people together to discuss dividing up the oil fields in Iraq.
Yeah, you're talking March of 2001, the one that Larry Klayman and Judicial Watch pried out of him with a FOIA lawsuit.
That is correct, and I agree with that. I know that it happened, but the way that we look at it is how presumptive of him to think that he would be able to get into a position, or the United States would be able to get into a position to divide those oil fields up, unless he knew at that time that we were going to invade Iraq. So I'm positing
2 years before that, Robin, he had signed the Project for a New America's letter to Bill Clinton in 1998. Yeah. Dick Cheney signed that, as did Jeb Bush, saying we have to invade Iraq now.
Tom, I know that, okay? I'm just trying to focus on that meeting, and that is that wasn't so much of an oil meeting as it was a planning meeting to figure out a way to, I think, enter a war.
I agree.
So that's what. Yeah. So that's one point. And I have to say, you've seen the film Vice, and I have 3 times. And boy, do I ever like that film. That filmmaker was very, very bold, and he snuck some things in there about 9/11 that we see. Also, just kind of 2 brief announcements on the same subject. Spike Lee is coming up with an HBO special, and he has had to edit out architects and engineers. And on 9/11, we're going to be releasing a peer-reviewed study about World Trade Center 7, and it's going to be uncomfortable.
I look forward to that, Robin. I think I know what happened there, but I make no claims to absolute knowledge. Robin, thank you for the call. And we will be back. Joe Madison is with us right after the break, right? Really cool.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention Riot Girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So as Republicans all across the country, now they're starting redistricting, right? Even more gerrymandering coming down the road. And, you know, this whole idea that Democrats shouldn't be allowed to vote, it's like just has become the animating force in the Republican Party. And some folks are doing something about it, thank God. Joe Madison and Al B. Sure and a bunch of other folks, Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King Jr. III, and others, are marching tomorrow on Washington, D.C. for voting rights. And our old buddy Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, he's right here on Sirius XM, channel 126, 6 to 10 a.m. every morning. Civil rights, human rights activist. JoeMadison.com is his website. You can tweet him at Madison Sirius XM. Joe, welcome back. Tell us about tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow will be a day where can you hear me, Tom?
Just fine, Joe. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Will be a day which we will be actually gathering at 8:30 McPherson Square in Washington, D.C., which is adjacent to the Black Lives Matter Plaza downtown, and then striking out to start walking immediately from there about, I think 10 o'clock to the White House, and in front of the White House, then straight up the street to Pennsylvania Avenue to the in front of the Capitol. We'll be at a venue in front of the Capitol. not in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Now, I want to emphasize that because usually these demonstrations have always been in front of the Lincoln Memorial. There's a reason it's going to be in front of the Capitol. That's because this situation, as it relates to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, used to be H.R. 4, which passed the House, now is in the hands of basically Joe Biden. That's why we're heading down from McPherson Square to the White House and then up Pennsylvania Avenue to near the Capitol, because we want people to see that it is the United States Senate and Congress that can now protect what you've been talking about this morning, the voting, the rights of voting. There are 40-plus states right now, as you know, and your audience knows, 40-plus states. I've heard as high really as 49 that have legislation that suppresses the vote. And by the way, this is not just the black vote. This is everybody's vote. And that's what's happening tomorrow. So 8:30, gather. 10 o'clock, we start the march. 11 o'clock, the program starts. And I'll be co-hosting along with Albie Shore, who, by the way, is now a radio broadcaster, but the young people certainly know him as one of the foremost recording artists and record producers. Yeah. We're doing something about it, man. Look, this matter, and by the way, it doesn't take a supermajority to get the John Lewis bill passed, the John Lewis voting, what commonly known as John Lewis Voting Rights Bill passed. It takes a simple majority, and we've got to make sure every Democrat is on votes. And then if that happens, and as we anticipate, probably every Republican will vote against it. It throws into a tie, and then Kamala Harris obviously breaks the tie, which is why voting is important. Can you imagine that here we are in 2021, and the importance of protecting people's right to vote could come down, Tom, to one vote? Yeah. One vote. I mean, but this is what we're fighting. I mean, and when you talk about, I heard your piece just before you brought me on about all these why the Republicans are restricting the vote, Tom, because they can't win if the majority of people vote. And here they are restricting it. We've gone from the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which basically gave people the opportunity to vote in just southern states. This would cover all 50 states. So yes, we're telling people, look, show up, speak up, show up and act out, and we can't give Democrats a pass on this one, and we can't give Biden a pass on this one. And the freaking filibuster is also potentially standing in the way. Here we go again. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Finish your thought. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
No. I was just simply saying, one of the last times the filibuster was used was to prevent the passage of the 64 Civil Rights Bill. Yep. And it's like history repeating itself. That's where I was going. Yeah, and the filibuster was exclusively used from when John C. Calhoun essentially started it in the 1830s up until the Civil War to block any discussion of slavery. They actually passed a law in the House. In the Senate, they just used a rule. And then after the Civil War, from that time until 1965, it was never used for anything except to block civil rights legislation, something that... Go ahead. Yeah, and I was going to say, and you remember they tried to use it for, I think it was initially for Supreme Court debates, Supreme Court nominee debates, and just recently, if correct me if I'm wrong, as it relates to the debate on the budget.
Yep.
Well, here's what the Senate did. Again, check me out on this. Here's what the Senate did. The Senate passed this rule that says, nope, you can't use it to block, to stop, as it relates to debate for Supreme Court justice. So they carved out a rule as it relates to the filibuster.
That's right. Mitch McConnell did that. Yep.
There you go. And then they carved out a rule as it relates to the budget. And here's the deal. Why? Because the budget was too important to the country to have, 41 senators or whatever the filibuster rule is, and it's not in the Constitution. You're absolutely right. It's too important. Well, if it's too important as it relates to the budget, if it's too important because of the responsibility of the Senate, which is carved out in the Constitution, then it certainly ought to be carved out so that it's not used to stop people or to restrict people from voting. This is nothing but, and I've said this again and I'll say it again, this march, ironically, 58 years after the March on Washington against repressive Republican Dixiecrats who wanted to turn back everything from, Social Security to you name it, minimum wage, the whole agenda. There's a great speech, if your people can find it, a clip from A. Philip Randolph, the founder of the sleeping car porters, the first black union. And it is, I'm going to tell you, to me, it's more significant than Martin Luther King, as significant, I should say, as Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. But he lays out why that march 58 years ago, to the date, took place August 28, 1963. So they were dealing with Jim Crow. Today, we're dealing with James Crow Esquire. It's just a sophisticated version of Jim Crow.
Is there, in order to get this passed, because this is not a budget bill and this doesn't have to do with the Supreme Court justice, as you correctly point out, those two holes have been drilled in the Senate rule. And by the way, this is not a law, and this is not in the Constitution. It's simply a rule of the Senate that can be changed with a majority vote of the Senate. 50 senators plus Kamala Harris, they can change their own rules. But because this rule still exists, this filibuster rule still exists, all it takes is one Republican senator to say, I object. They don't even have to say it out loud. They can send an email to Chuck Schumer to say, I object, and suddenly the Democrats have to come up with 60 votes to overcome this. Have you heard that there is a particular Republican senator who intends to filibuster this?
Yes, I interviewed Congressman James Clyburn, and he explained that to me just like you did, and he believes that is it Murkowski from Alaska apparently has signaled him that she would be in favor of doing just that. Now,
of filibustering or of changing the rules?
Of changing the rules.
Oh, that's consequential. I mean, it'll take 10 Republicans to make that. Well, actually, no. It would only take.
No.
Yeah, if she could, because the only block we've got right now is Sinema and Manchin. We need 2 Republicans.
Yeah. And so now again, and that's why he is confident. Now he expressed his confidence on my show earlier this week. I think I had him on. It was either Monday or Tuesday, but
oh, that's great.
And he expressed confidence that that would happen, and he deliberately mentioned her.
Yeah.
He thinks that she might be the one to flip.
That would be great.
Again,
we need one more.
Saturday morning, and again, check. The maneuvering. Look at to be honest with you, the maneuvering can be confusing, Tom, to us.
Oh no, I get it. Hey, Joe, I'm 30 seconds away from a hard break I can't control. Is there a website? Give people the information they need to participate tomorrow.
Well, yeah, you can go to National Action Network. .org, or you can go to our social media. We've got everything up on our social media. Yeah, and whatever, the other social media outlets that we have. So it's all there. But Saturday, again,
tomorrow,
everybody start gathering McPherson Square, Washington, D.C., and we're going to say show up, speak up, show up and act out, put Biden, the Democrats, on notice. You owe us this one. You owe us.
The great Joe Madison. Joe, thanks again for dropping by. It's always wonderful having you on the program. Great talking with you. Thank you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It is 18 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls right after this. And welcome back. Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Keno, what's on your mind today?
Well, good morning. Green greetings, I say. I'm the moose herder, and that gets it in my Google file if I say that.
Okay.
But today, I want to connect a new book by Noam Chomsky, which is called The Climate Crisis and the Global Green New Deal, which he wrote in collaboration with an economist, Robert Poland. And then in the Wall Street Journal on August the 12th, one of their columnists, Mr. Daniel Henninger, opened the door for debate and discussion when he said, let's consider and think just for a moment that the United Nations Red Flag Climate Crisis Report is right. Then that poses a practical political question of how should we mitigate the world's climate challenge. So there is an open door for debate. Number one, I've sent in a response to the Wall Street Journal trying to get some discussion and debate about Mr. Henninger's premise. Tom would like to invite you and people watching to consider getting into the debate, and let's get the Wall Street Journal debating about what we can do to make deal with this, mitigate this climate crisis. And I challenge Mr. Henninger to do a book review of Noam Chomsky's book and in his column. And, the Wall Street Journal has opened up the door for consideration of discussion. Now, his article was called "The Democrats Will Ruin the Climate." And it said the Democrats just want to use a lot of money for taxpayers' money, and they want to micromanage people's lives by telling them they can't have cars and they have to ride buses and stuff like that. So I think it opens the door for a good debate in the newspaper of the big business of the United States. What do you think, Tom? Are you aware of Mr. Henninger's article, August the 12th?
I am not, Keno. I gave up my subscription to the Wall Street Journal some months ago. It was getting way too right wing for me.
Yes, I agree. Most of their climate stuff is all this denial stuff.
Yep.
But Mr. Henninger has opened up the door, and he said, let's just for a minute think that it is true. So what should we do? So let's challenge him.
Well, I think you're doing it. You're walking through it, and if you're a subscriber to the Journal, you can comment on these articles, at least some of them, and I encourage you to do that. Keno, I have a question for you. You've been calling into this show for years as the Moose-Hooter Republican, the guy who is going to try to return the Republican Party to, some semblance of, Dwight Eisenhower rationality, respectability, cautious,
exactly.
but, straightforward and still in favor of a better America. And I know that you gave that up in the last few months, figuring that the Republican Party was irredeemable. What has happened to your movement, and what's your current thinking on this?
Well, I want to get the Green Party to be more oriented toward doing the business that gets the things in place that needs to be done.
But that's just going to help the Republican Party, Keno, because the Green Party will pull people away from the Democratic Party, and then you'll get more Republicans elected.
No. I want people to sign up at the Green Party and not have a presidential candidate, perhaps, but be in
Why not have them sign up?
probably.
Why not have them become part of the Democratic Party and promote green values?
Because have a few people in the Green Party that are pushing the priority of the things that need to be done to avert.
Well, I get that at the local level.
ill.
I'm a big fan of the Green Party at the local level, but it's what I've seen in the Green Party at the national level can be, well, whatever. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Keno, it's always great talking with you. I really admire your activism all these years and your willingness to understand what's really going on in the world. we don't always agree, but I honor it. Keno, thank you so much for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So the Republican Party has sold themselves way back, all the way back to the 60s, really, as the serious party. We're the party of issues. We take stuff seriously. We have serious policy analysis. We have serious constitutional analysis. We are serious about the economy. We have all these think tanks, Heritage and Competitive Enterprise and Cato, and we've got the Federalist Society finding serious judges that we can put on the federal bench. And in response to 4 dead Americans, they got real serious. 5 House committees, 2 Senate committees. They created a separate House Select Committee for 4 dead Americans. That was Benghazi. Thousands of hours of testimony. The Secretary of State testifying for 8 hours straight. But when 5 people die at the Capitol, not so much. Got a new video about it over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, and it is Anything Goes Friday. Pat in Hawthorne, California, you wanted to talk about the recall going on in your state? It's starting to get serious here.
Tom, I'm putting out an emergency call to all California voters to respond with a no vote on the recall of Governor Newsom.
Yep.
Trump and his minions are gunning for our governor.
Well, not just your governor. They also think if they can get a Republican in that governor's position, then they're going to go after Dianne Feinstein and try and force her to resign so they can replace her with a Republican and take over the Senate. And she's 88. I mean, they may succeed.
Right. Well, they're gunning for our governor, especially Larry Elder, the talk show host and mentor of Stephen Miller.
Yep. And he's all over right-wing talk radio all over California.
Absolutely. Know that this is a very close race, and every vote is important. The wolves are dressed in sheep's clothing, saying that things won't really change.
Yeah.
Don't believe them. We could lose the years of progress that we have made with those who care about the people of this state.
Yeah.
And not just with big business. Mail your ballots by the end of next week. Vote no on the recall.
There you go. Mail your ballot today. Pat, thank you very much for the call. Chris in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Chris, got a minute here to the break. What's up?
Yeah, the virus has killed more people than any war. The virus knows no borders. The U.S. has a choice: protect patents and mega profits of billionaires and let it rage out of control around the world, or suspend the patents and let the entire world produce billions of doses of vaccine to end the virus.
I'm with you. That's why I mentioned SARS and MERS. I mean, I think we need to
profit or end the pandemic and save millions.
Right, and possibly save us from this virus mutating into something that's more like the original SARS viruses, which is even more deadly than the one that we're dealing with. I'm with you, Chris. I am absolutely with you. We need these TRIPS waivers, and we need them now. Chris, thank you very much for the call. It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program. Coming up on 28 minutes past the hour, back with your calls on whatever you'd like to talk about. California recall, Supreme Court, flying saucers, pigeons, your choice. We'll pick it up.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, no, the Supreme Court was so wrong on that.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested, special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come Election Day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status, fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive-sum, but identity conflict is zero-sum. The book, Why We're Polarized, by Ezra Klein.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Just a reminder that my daily rants are published every day over at hartmanreport.com, and our podcast, our 1-hour podcast of the show, which is entirely free, is available through, iTunes and all the normal places where you find podcasts, cut down of our show. And that we post a weekly video over at thomhartmann.com. And the one this week is about seditious conspiracy, U.S. Code 2384. And the argument I'm making is that this law, which imposes 20 years in prison to by force, prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, end quote, is something that we should be seriously considering dusting off and applying to not just the people who showed up on January 6th, but the people who sent them there. Check it out, thomhartmann.com. Five minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And picking up your phone calls here on Anything Goes Friday. George in Garden City, Kansas. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, one thing I'd like to see happen is if the government decides to send out another stimulus check, make one of the rules of eligibility is proof of vaccination to receive your $2,000 stimulus check. And that's the only comment I'd like to make. Thank you, Tom.
Well, I think that I don't object to that, George. I think it would be difficult to enforce, but I am fully expecting, now that this vaccine is approved, that probably, typically the insurance companies come out with their new rules, as it were, in October, because they've got that open enrollment period of mid-October through mid-January. I'm guessing that you're going to see health insurance companies and maybe even life insurance companies say, not unreasonably, we are going to start rating people the same way we do with regard to the use of tobacco. If you use tobacco, your life insurance policy is more expensive, if we'll even write one for you. If you won't get vaccinated, ditto. If you use tobacco, your health insurance policy is going to be more expensive for you. If you're not going to get vaccinated, ditto. I'm fully expecting that. So, we'll see how it shakes out. But, George, keep thinking. That's a good one. I appreciate the call. Charles in Miami. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Hey, Charles.
I'm calling because I'm thinking, what about the Afghan soldiers' point of view? I always hear three sides to one story. And my thing is, basically, Trump our only ally in Afghanistan, which was the Afghan government, who in part was employing the soldiers. And how in the world did our military didn't know that the Afghan soldiers weren't paid for at least 3 months, and they're walking out the door and they're thinking, well, these Afghan soldiers are going to support, us through our exit. something is wrong with that picture. And as far as the Afghan...
Are you sure of that, Charles? I didn't realize that this corrupt Ghani government, where Ghani flew to the United Arab Emirates with, what was it, $169 million in $100 bills stuffed into his airplane? I didn't realize he wasn't paying his army. Are you sure about that?
No, yeah, definitely. We've heard accounts where the army wasn't paid for 3 months.
Huh.
I've heard that on different news. Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
And what bothered me about all of this and why this came to my mind as far as Afghan soldiers was I was Googling this Afghan soldier and I saw coward. And that really bothered me. So, you have people that they didn't want, these Afghan soldiers did not, and they probably could have had a chance to sign up with ISIS or the Taliban. But no, they actually probably are people that believe in democracy and wanted a better
and over 60,000 of them died. We've lost a little over 2,000, I think around 2,400 soldiers in Afghanistan in the 20 years we've been there. Over 60,000 Afghan soldiers that we know of and can identify have died. The actual number is probably at least twice that.
Right, and this time they actually took American supplied airplanes and went to different parts of I think it's Turkestan or I forget the different names. Right, and a different part of northern Afghanistan as well, just to get away from the Taliban. So to me, those are the people that still need to be rescued because they did not want to be part of fighting against America. And to me, all this crap that we hear on Fox News is just that those people are raging. They've been raging since they lost the election, and they're not going to be happy until they have Joe Biden's head on a spike and get to call every Democrat every name in the book. So what we need to do is this. We need to remember Trump is the one who signed this agreement. He let 5,000, somewhere along the line, 5,000 Taliban soldiers who are now, I think, ISIS-K, are now free because of Donald Trump. And they're trying to blame it on us. But let's not forget the Afghan soldiers that refuse to fight ISIS, and what are we doing, and why isn't their story being told as well?
Yeah, I'm with you. Excellent point, Charles. Sticking up for the underdog. Good on you. Thank you. Susie in Bloomington, Indiana. Hey, Susie, you've got a problem with the bus service there?
Yes. I'm a multiply disabled person, and I live in an area of Bloomington where there are a lot of elderly and disabled people. And the city bus service is trying to eliminate one of the routes that we depend on to get to stores, to get our groceries, and to go to doctor appointments in the area. They put their plans on hold until December, but basically they're going to leave us stranded. And I'm trying to bring attention to this issue because there are many people here who will have no other options. They do have a paratransit service. The problem with that is it can be rather cost prohibitive if you need to go out several times a week. And they were trying to tell us that they were going to get us like Uber rides for $1 to go to the grocery store, and I just don't see that. They haven't even talked about that lately. I think that was just some pie in the sky issue.
Do they have regular public meetings, Susie?
They do, and so I'm planning on going to the next Bloomington Transit meeting and a city council meeting.
Good.
I have dealt with them in the past, and I have beat them in the past.
Good.
But the forces are greater, and I get more disabled. I have memory problems, and it's getting harder for me to organize things. So that's why I was hoping to publicize this issue.
Is there a website, Susie, that people who are outside of Bloomington, Indiana can at least tweet or make their voices heard or make a phone call or whatever? Is there any way for people out of town to?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do have a public comment space, and it's customer, CUSTOMER, at bloomingtontransit.com.
Okay.
And
customer
phone number,
at bloomingtontransit.com, okay?
Yes, and their phone number is 812-336-7433.
Yeah, and if you call that number, A, please be a resident of Indiana at the very least, and B, be very polite. I mean,
Yes.
So good on you, Susie. I wish you the very best. Keep us up to date and let us know how it works out. That's activism at its very best. Speaking of activism, Norma in Montgomery, Alabama, one of my favorite activists, on the line with us. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to let you know that COVID here in Alabama is very bad. We had 5,000 new cases yesterday. We had 50 people die yesterday. Mobile is out of morgue space. We're asking for federal military medical help. The schools are being closed again. We had 111 children in one school with 16 employees test positive last week. School's been open 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And this is very bad. And schools are being closed for deep cleaning. And we still have people here having hysterics over wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And you have these people. Oh, you're violating my beliefs if you have gay people walking on the streets, and now these same idiots are saying you can't force me to wear a mask, and it's just.
I know the sign that I keep seeing at these things, "My body, my choice." It's like this is hysterical. You just stole that from the pro-choice movement.
Yes, well, we're getting that on our Facebook pages too. You people say it's my choice. I'm not going to wear a mask. Well, you can keep your hands off of our bodies because you're not female to start out with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, I'm worried about that.
And then there's the nudists. It's my choice to wear clothes.
Yeah. Well, how about the women in Afghanistan? They're going to have no choice, and they'll be pregnant at 12 and 13.
Yeah, sadly.
And dying on the floor because they're not allowed to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
But, here, though, we've got this hurricane coming in also. People are already evacuating out of Louisiana. And so you have the potential for spreading it even more as people flee, and they don't want to wear their masks. They're upset, and they're worried about their homes, and you can have, they're talking about this has the potential to be another Katrina.
Yeah. And it's hitting on the anniversary of Katrina, isn't it? Like right to the day, or at least to the week.
That was the 25th of August.
Okay.
So
today's the 27th of August. Yeah. So it's the same week.
When it hit was the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's supposed to come in Saturday night, Sunday morning, and that's if it continues at the same speed.
Yeah.
But this COVID problem here. Thank you, Trump, for being here last weekend.
Oh, geez, I completely forgot about that. Are they able to track it now to Trump's super spreader event?
I don't know, but I think that by the time these people, they've been home now for a week, wherever they came from, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, it's no telling how far they came from. You're going to see even more COVID in the next 5 days.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Norma, keep the faith. Thanks so much for the call, and I wish you the very best there in Alabama. 5 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Trying to see who's been on hold here longest. Mike in Elyria, Ohio. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Elyria to the best service class in America.
Elyria. Okay. What's up?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. At your age, we're both within a year of each other. And I read the obituaries. And a suburb maybe about 2 miles from us just had a Sturgis rally death.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Somebody just died just down the road from you that you can track back to Kristi Noem's Sturgis super spreader event.
Well, I read the obituaries, and in the obituary it says that this gentleman loved Harley Davidsons, and he was at Sturgis. So.
Wow. It's so unfortunate.
It's on our doorsteps.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And it's happening all over the country. So that was what you wanted to share with us, Mike?
Yeah, and I'm waiting for your book. It's on order, so.
Oh, on healthcare? Yeah, that should be out next week.
I'll have them all, yeah. I'll have them all except for the new ones coming up, so.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope you find it of value, and when you have a chance to read it, you give me a shout. Thank you very much.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Good talking to you. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
I just want to reiterate something that Morris was bringing up. He says, talking about buying out companies like oil companies.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should, we could, for $321 billion, we could buy the top 10 biggest ag companies in the country.
Really?
And then, yeah, I added up, Archland Midland's one. That's only $35 billion. So about $320 billion. We could buy them all out. Then we can make reparations to African Americans, give them each 10 acres and a little small farm, or maybe 40, they're ripped off in the first place. And we could, with the Green New Deal, then we could leave a lot of that land for because the big part of the climate change is the deal with the how we plant. So we leave fields, we plow them up. That would be a great sequestration of carbon.
Right.
And we could also start the CC program again, and we could put people to work planting trees. And I'm crazy. I think we should have a bike lane across the country with little charging stations for electric bikes. I know that's pretty out there.
That's kind of cool. Louise, when we lived in D.C., Louise had an electric bike, and she tooled all over the city on it. It was, it was one of these pedal bikes. You pedal it most of the time, but if you're pushing up a hill, you push the button, and you get an electric assist, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm getting older. I like biking, but I can't do what I used to. But it'd be kind of nice to, they're pretty popular in the city here, too. And you can have little charging stations, a little trip across America, and even make them with recycled plastic that would give people permanent jobs, with a guaranteed federal job. And, so I don't know, just little thoughts on something we could do with, if we bought out these, money is speech. Let's use our speech and buy these companies out that are destroying our planet.
Yeah.
And at the same time, save the planet.
Yeah,
So,
one of my solutions in this new Hidden History of American Healthcare book is to buy out the health insurance companies. That would be in the neighborhood of $1 trillion. I had no idea you could buy out all the ag companies for $1/3 of $1 trillion.
Well, that's just the top 10. Top 10.
Well, the top 10 are probably a good chunk of them. That's fascinating.
That's
Jeff,
true.
thanks. Some good ideas out there. We need to put them into place. We'll be right back in just 1 minute after I read an ad over on the commercial side. I'll be right back with you. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So Rand Paul is now echoing Louis Gohmert. Remember Louis Gohmert back in the day, back in the after 9/11, when he was talking about terror babies. There's Muslims coming to the United States to have babies who will be citizens, and we can't kick them out anymore. And then they're going to grow up and they're going to be terrorists. Yeah, and we all kind of laughed at Louis Gohmert. So now Rand Paul is talking about how the Biden administration is taking kids from down at the border who may have it, COVID, and they're plucking them up and putting them all over the United States as if they're wishing to seed the country with a new variant. Right. But that's not half of it. Then he goes on to say that, for him, quote, the bottom line for those who are saying I won't go to a restaurant unless everybody's vaccinated, he says, mind your own business. Well, Rand, it is our business. Public health is all of our businesses. I've got a whole new rant about Rand Paul's bizarre take on the public good over at thomhartmann.com. It's a video. You can check it out there. And welcome back. We're talking, we're talking all kinds of things. It's Anything Goes Friday, whatever's on your mind. Bob in Rockford, Illinois. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Good afternoon. I've been reading a book that was written by Carol Leoning, who is an investigative reporter for the Washington Times newspaper.
I learned after having her on as a guest, or her co-author, that it's actually pronounced Lenig, but it's spelled Leonig. So I get what you're saying, Bob. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, the book is called Zero Fail, and it shocks me. I'm 79 years old. I'm a widower, And I want to read this, just this paragraph from the prologue, and see how it strikes
If it's
you.
very brief, Bob, please. We ask people not to read on the air here.
Oh, okay. Well, this paragraph asks about how can this organization, who is one of the worst working environments in Washington and can't hire enough people fast enough to fill the vacancies, and can't stop an assassination with stubborn devotion alone. And I highly recommend
What's she talking about there with that, Bob?
Pardon? Say that again, please.
What's she talking about? This organization, what organization is she talking about?
It's the Secret Service.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right. She wrote a book about the Secret. Yeah, that's which, by the way, came out of the Treasury Department after the Abraham Lincoln assassination.
Yes. I know they started then. But over time, they have been given more and more duties to perform, and their budget has grown from several million to multi-million dollars. And the leaders of the organization are very vindictive if the agents bring something up. So a lot of the agents are silenced by fear of losing their jobs, et cetera, et cetera.
So, Bob, what are your thoughts on how to reform the Secret Service in ways that make it more functional? And I would think if anybody would be concerned about that, it'd be the President of the United States. This is his security detail.
Yes, I would agree. But I think it needs to have a serious look at, a committee and so on. But it's just amazing what the mission of the Secret Service has done over the years and what it has to do.
Yeah.
To me, and the budget is gone into the multi-million dollars, and of course they've had some very poor things that the agents have done. For instance, when Obama was going to South America, they went to the
they all got drunk and were hooking up with hookers.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember it well. Yep, Bob, I'm hopeful that Carol Lenig's book will produce some change, and thank you for highlighting it. That was excellent. Scott in Charlevoix, Michigan, the town where my parents are buried. Hey, Scott, where I used to vacation as a child.
Hey, Tom.
What's up?
Well, I'm going to get a little conspiratorial here. What I think is, to most people, is seemingly insignificant symbolism, I think will be viewed as the most significant symbolism or symbolic gesture to mark the 21st century.
We have a half a minute, Scott. Let's get right to it.
Okay. And that is the GOP and their master classes altering of their logo to flip the stars upside down. I view that as their declaration of war on democracy.
I do too. They did that in 2000.
Praise of fascism. Yep. Yeah, in 2000. And so we're talking about 20 years in Afghanistan, but how about this 20-year war on democracy right here?
Yep.
And, in full embrace of fascism and use of brute force tactics on all fronts.
And I have asked Republican senators, I've asked Republican House members, I asked the chairman of the Republican Party, why did you guys turn the American star, the right side up 5-pointed star, into the upside down satanic star on your logo? And none of them have been able to give me a straight answer.
Yep.
I've been asking this for 20 years.
I know. I've been listening to you for about 12.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It's like, why would they do this? Why would they put the openly satanic star as their logo? There's 3 of them on the elephant on their logo. It's their official logo. You can look it up, GOP logo. And the stars are upside down. And, you flip a flag upside down, it's an international distress signal when the stars go upside down.
Exactly.
But, yeah, Scott, it's still a mystery. Or maybe not. Maybe they really are just in league with Satan. God only knows. Scott, thank you for the call. We'll continue with your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this break here at the top of the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. So I think I'll share a few Anything Goes things with you. Back in 1960, Richard Nixon and John Kennedy were running for president. And Richard Nixon was saying that John Kennedy was going to do deficit spending and was going to borrow and tax and wasn't going to help America. It was bizarre. And so I thought I would just share with you what John Kennedy said in one of the debates about raising spending in the United States. I mean, keep in mind, this was 60 years ago, right? 59 years ago. It's like things just never change. Here is he was candidate John Kennedy during the second presidential debate back in 1960.
Yes, I have stated in both debates and state again that I believe in a balanced budget and have supported that concept during my 14 years in the Congress. The only two times when an unbalanced budget is warranted would be during a serious recession and we had that in 58 in an unbalanced budget of $12 billion, or a national emergency where there should be large expenditures for national defense, which we had in World War II and during part of the Korean War.
So in other words, you know, all this Republican hysteria that I'm just going to borrow and spend is nuts. Actually, what he says he's going to do is he's going to raise taxes. He's going to do it by doing away with some of the loopholes, you know, the 3 martini lunch stuff. He said, you know, we can make some tax changes and raise the same amount of money. Here he continues.
Third, I think it's possible to gain a $700 million to $1 billion through tax changes.
There you go.
Which I believe would close up loopholes on dividend withholding, on expense accounts.
And what are you going to do with that money by closing up those loopholes that the Republicans love so much? Here's what Jack Kennedy promised. And by the way, largely followed through on.
So in my judgment, we would spend more money in this administration on aid to education. We'd spend more money on housing. We'd spend more money, and I hope more wisely, on defense than this administration has done. But I believe that the next administration should work for a balanced budget, and that would be my intention. Mr. Nixon misstates my figures constantly.
Lies.
Which is, of course, is right. But the fact of the matter is, here is where I stand, and I just want to have it on the public record.
What do you do when somebody like Richard Nixon is constantly lying about you? Oh, and then Harry Truman. In 1952, Harry Truman, the guy who became president when Franklin Roosevelt died, he was FDR's vice president, and then he got elected in the election of well, actually, he didn't, it wasn't him, it was Adlai Stevenson who was running against Dwight Eisenhower in 52. But he was president on March 29th, 1952, Harry Truman, when, remember they called him Give Him Hell Harry? This is why. And then I'll end this and we'll just pick up your phone calls here for the rest of the hour.
Now I want to say something very important to you about this issue of morality in government. It is just as immoral to use the lawmaking power of the government to enrich the few at the expense of the many as it is to steal money from the public treasury. That is stealing money from the public treasury.
This is 1952.
Legislation that favored the greed of monopoly and the trickery of Wall Street was a form of corruption that did the country 4 times as much harm as Teapot Dome ever did. Private, selfish interests are always trying to corrupt the government in this way. Powerful financial groups are always trying to get favors for themselves. Now, the Democratic administration has been fighting against these efforts to corrupt the powers of government. We haven't always won, but we have never surrendered, and we never will.
Again, this was 1952. The Republicans were up to this.
For all these years, we've been fighting to use our natural resources for the benefit of the public, to develop our forests and our public oil reserves and our water power for the benefit of all, to raise the incomes of all our citizens, to protect the farmer and the worker against the power of monopoly. And where have the Republicans been in this fight for morality in government?
Good question.
Do they come out and vote with us to keep the special interests from robbing the public? Not at all. Most of them are on the other side. The same thing when you come to the question of the conduct of government officials. The Republicans make a great whoop and holler about the honesty of federal employees, but they are usually the first to show up in a government office asking for special favors for private interests and in raising Cain if they don't get them.
1952 this is going on.
These Republican gentlemen can't have it both ways. They can't be for morality on Tuesday and Thursday and then be for special privileges for their clients on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Give them hell, Harry!
Well, I don't think the black is white campaign of the Republican Party is going to succeed. I think the voters are going to see through this holier-than-thou disguise that our Republican friends are putting on. All the tricks of Republican propaganda cannot make the people forget that the Democratic Party has been working for their welfare.
There you go. Harry Truman. March 29th, 1952. Anyhow, as I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. Picking up your phone calls here. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday.
Hey, happy
I'm
Friday.
Curious, when you were a kid, did you ever play any competitive team sports of any type?
Just, you know, baseball, football, pickup games here and there.
Yeah.
I was never on
I
an
played
official
high school
team.
football.
Yeah.
I I enjoyed it, and you really learn a lot about people. And the point I wanted to make is some people are extremely competitive, and a lot of people have very competitive nature, and it seems like you never bring that aspect of humanity out when you discuss politics and economics. You kind of just gloss over that fact. You kind of like everybody's equal when that's not true. And, another thing is, the reason I bring it up is I see our world getting more and more competitive because our populations are rising. We're going to be at 8 billion people in a few years.
Right.
The climate's
Resources
changing.
are scarcer. Yeah.
Resources are going to be dwindling. Fresh water has become an issue. People are going to need to be moving away from the coasts. So our world and our nation is going to get more and more competitive, not less.
Correct.
And I think people need to be made aware of it and get ready for it. And I think we need to discuss competitive behaviors within the human race. And I just like to hear more discussion about that. That's all I got.
That's a great topic, Brian. I would refer you to Chris Ryan, I believe. Yeah, Christopher Ryan is the author. He wrote a book called Civilized to Death. We had him on as a guest a few months ago. I would refer you to Bregman's Humankind, which came out last year, and to the original book by Peter Farb called Humankind that was published in 1978 that Bregman basically updated and rewrote. And also Man's Rise to Civilization and the Native American, written by Peter Farb. And in all of those books, they talk about how at different times in the history of the human race, whether it's a group of castaway kids taking over a desert island for a couple of years, not their choice, but they were stuck there, or whether it was the Maori people discovering New Zealand and going on an orgy of moa bird eating for 200 years and then wiping out the last bird, or the people of British New Caledonia doing the same thing, that every single one of these societies went through a period where resources got scarce, competition cranked up, the most competitive or the most brutal and willing to use violence among them ended up with political power or social power, that lasted only for a short period of time, and then the rest of society came in and said, enough. And in fact, as Ben Franklin pointed out at some length in his autobiography, and Thomas Jefferson noted at some length in his diaries, and Jefferson knew this very well. His father was a surveyor, and Jefferson, from the time he was around 9 until his father died when he was 15, he used to travel with his dad all around Virginia to map the state. And his father spoke 6 different languages, Native American languages, and Jefferson got to know some of them. And what they all pointed out was that once these societies became mature, once the people in New Caledonia were a couple of hundred years down the road from having wiped out all their resources, once the people of Australia, New Zealand, same deal, once in the case with the Native Americans, the Iroquois Confederacy, what Jefferson and Franklin pointed out, was that they began then to view that kind of competitive behavior that you're describing as a mental illness, as a cultural mental illness. And tribes actually used banishment to evict and expel people who were basically hoarding, who were keeping things from everybody else, who were putting themselves above others. And that this wasn't just unique to the Iroquois. This was something that we found among the Melanesians 500 years ago that Captain Cook discovered, when he showed up at Murderer's Bay in New Zealand, or what he called Murderer's Bay. That over and over and over again, we've seen this cycle repeated. And I'm just so very hopeful, Brian, if I can just step off, take the opening you just gave me, that as things become more difficult, as resources become scarcer, and we're certainly seeing this right now across America, across the world in many ways, but across America with our homeless crisis, that rather than responding with more brutality like humans traditionally do for a short period of time, that we can move through that rapidly and very quickly get to responding to it with increasing humanity and some solutions that have to do with, gently reducing the population of the human race and reducing our footprint on Earth. What do you think?
I agree with all that, but one obstacle modern humans we all have is the elites and the hyper-competitive have control of the mass media. They have control of they try and control the conversation, as well as some sectors of religion.
Yes.
Which these ancient people, they didn't have that. You know, everything.
Well, they did have that, but they overthrew them. You know, is what happened.
I don't think they had mass media, though. I mean,
no, they didn't have mass media, but I mean, even Jared Diamond writes about this in Guns, Germs, and Steel, about how, you know, these guys, these basically warlords would rise up, and then, you know, within a generation, young people would take them back down again.
All right, Tom, you have a good day.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian. Good talking to you. The history of humanity, Bregman did just a brilliant job, by the way, with his book, Humankind. The history of humanity can be viewed as an absolute horror show, or it can be viewed as an opportunity for extraordinary optimism. And I think we have to, with clear eyes, view both.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So much for my Anything Goes Friday rant. Thank you, Brian, for getting us off on that. We'll be back with more of your calls as we continue. And welcome back. Joseph in Sun Valley, Idaho, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Joseph, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday again. Wow, what a great last caller. I'm just amazed that your callers have so much information and you compliment them so nice. Yesterday you were talking about how people coped with the stressful political things that we have. Mm-hmm. After the election, a lot of my friends had the same reaction. The first thing was, oh, thank God Biden won. And that it was followed instantly with, my God, I can't believe 71 million Americans voted for him again.
For Trump, yeah.
And so, I started thinking, and I love to learn, and I thought, well, why do people believe in anything? And I really hadn't had a background in neuroscience, and I found through Stanford they had a 60-hour current understanding of neuroscience from Dr. Robert Sapolsky. And the thing that's been occurring to me, and the thing that helped, is it seems like right-wing media is actually approaching people through their primitive brain.
Yeah, it's all about attacking the limbic brain and the brainstem, stimulating a fight or flight response.
Right. And and these things can be addictive, like alcohol. You start out and you feel elated, and you think, this is great, I can drink and be elated, but your brain doesn't like to be off balance like that, and your brain will modulate down, and that's why people with substance abuse have to do more and more drugs to overcome the brain's natural balancing,
right, just to get back to normal.
That craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the same thing with these right-wingers who are constantly poking the amygdala.
Right. There's an article in Raw Story today. It's titled "How Trump Rewired His Voters' Brains," and he actually came up with a great idea. He calls it amygdala hijacking. Mm-hmm. But for me, to be able to understand why huge swaths of our population are susceptible to this, it makes sense when you start to think that they're actually addicted to this. I could put it, I think, when Trump calls them like super patriots, it's really ringing with these people. And it's a powerful way of approaching communication.
It's like gambling. You hit that jackpot and you get this rush of adrenaline and this rush of dopamine, and it's like, whoa, is that great? And then, when you start losing, it's like, and the amygdala starts freaking out. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, Joseph. And they're using this the same way.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell you, like I say, I can't appreciate the value of your show. One of the things that really helps me cope is to realize that there's a lot of thoughtful and loving people out there.
There are.
Have a nice weekend, Tom.
Thank you, Joseph. It's so nice to hear from you. Thank you for your kind words and for your contribution to the conversation. It's not often people call in and want to talk about the amygdala. God bless you. Thank you, Joseph. And thanks for watching us there in Sun Valley, Idaho, I believe it was. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Give me just 1 minute to read an ad over on the SiriusXM commercial side, and I'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's this one's a geeky science one. And it's about this little snippet of genetic material, what's called microRNA. And the name of this one is called MIR1, M-I-R-1. And we've known for years that when muscles are used, I'm talking about, exercise to the point where you feel fatigue in your muscles, that when when muscles are exercised, it depletes them of MIR1. What they didn't know is where that MIR1 goes and what it does. And it turns out that our fat cells draw the MIR1 in from the muscles, and it causes the fat cells to start converting themselves into fatty acids that can be used to feed the muscles. So we're not just building muscle, but we're also reducing fat in our body. It's absolutely fascinating. I'm going into depth on it in this new video. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Carmen, or is it Carmine, on Long Island, New York. Carmen?
Yeah.
Hey, Carmen,
how you
what's
doing,
up?
Tom? I just called to tell you that you were talking about the insurance company probably raising rates on vaccinated people.
Mm-hmm.
There was an article in yesterday's paper in Long Island that Delta Airlines is going to start charging their employees $200 extra a month for not being vaccinated.
Right. That's because Delta is doing what's called self-insurance. They have an insurance company that administers their plan, that writes the checks and does the payments. But the premiums they just pay a fee for that service. That's all. The actual premiums they take out of the paychecks of their employees, and they basically self-insure. And what they found is it's costing them, on average, $50,000 in their own health expenses for every time one of their employees gets sick. With COVID. And this is nuts. They don't want to pay it anymore.
Yeah. They should all start doing it. All the insurance companies.
I think they will. I think this is the first shoe dropping.
Yeah. I hope there's a lot of shoes dropping. This is ridiculous. These unvaccinated people causing all this harm.
I am absolutely with you, and I think this is what you've got. This is coming. Carmen, thanks a lot for the call. That was a good one. Jeremiah in Coalport, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jeremiah, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I was wondering if you could walk us through what the transformation of the United States government from the oligarchy that we have now into a totalitarian dictatorship if the Republicans win in 2024.
All you have to do is look at Hungary. First of all the media gets bought up or shut down. It gets bought up by friends of the oligarchs or just gets shut down. People like me end up in jail on trumped-up charges, things like that, number one. Number two, anybody in the courts that they don't like, they get rid of and they replace. And number three, they start going after legislators in a big way. It shouldn't be a secret, Jeremiah. It's fairly predictable.
Okay, so I was just wondering if that's what you thought, if you thought we were going to end up like a Hungary or a Putin Russia or a Nazi Germany.
Yeah, well, I don't think that Nazi Germany, I think there's, we should probably take that off the table for the moment, but I think that Russia and Hungary, and it's happening right now as we speak in Poland. It has happened already in Turkey. It happened in Egypt, although it took a military coup with El-Sisi. It is happening in the Philippines. It's happening in Brazil, where strong men have taken over governments, and what you find is that, the opposition voices vanish or get killed off. Jeremiah, thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And the one thing that stops all this, in every single case where it has been stopped, is an educated and informed populace.
For our Thom Hartmann Book Club excerpt today, we're reading from Ed Morales' new book, Fantasy Island, Colonialism, Exploitation, and the Betrayal of Puerto Rico. This is from the first chapter. There was never any doubt that the United States wanted Puerto Rico for its own when it began a war with Spain near the turn of the 20th century. Cuba had been in the throes of independence war with Spain off and on since 1868, and the conflict that began in 1895 seemed ripe for the United States to capitalize on. The sinking of the USS Maine, an American naval ship destroyed by an explosion while moored just outside Havana, fueled American entry into the war. Although there are conflicting theories about the source of the explosion, including the likelihood it was caused by a spontaneous internal fire, William Randolph Hearst's newspaper chain blew up the incident into the perfect catalyst for the United States to enter the conflict. When Theodore Roosevelt entered the fray with his army of Rough Riders, the whole affair came as no surprise to anyone who'd been paying attention to the lust U.S. government leaders and military had long expressed to expand southward and westward. And although the idea of manifest destiny was at the forefront of the political discourse of this period, it's less often observed that the United States' expansionist gaze was saturated with racial language and attitudes, at once desirous of and repelled by Latin America's mestizo mulatto social dynamic. The Haitian Revolution at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th created a U.S. obsession with both Cuba and Puerto Rico because of the potential of a similar black-led revolt on those islands. In 1826, Virginia Senator John Randolph feared that such a revolt would render the southern United States vulnerable to invasion from Cubans in rowboats. For this reason, he objected to the United States participating in the 1826 Panama Congress because American diplomats would have to endure the horror of a U.S. diplomat taking his seat in the Congress, quote, beside the native African, their American descendants, the mixed breeds, the Indians, and the half-breeds, without any offense or scandal at so motley a mixture, end quote. The logic driving this perspective underlined not only the importance of slavery to the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, but also, as Matthew Karp points out in this vast southern empire, the extent to which slave owners and their elected representatives disproportionately shaped U.S. foreign policy. Going back as far as the Haitian Revolution, fear of a successful slave rebellion in the newly formed United States strongly motivated Southern politicians. As Karp mentions, to that end, Presidents Madison and Monroe, quote, used overwhelming force to destroy black maroon settlements in southern Florida, end quote. Fear of slave rebellions also briefly united the interests of American slaveholders and Cuban elites who wanted independence from Spain, but in the late 19th century, after abolition, Roosevelt's forces fought in conjunction with Afro-Cuban armies against their common Spanish foe. The move to wrest Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spain came just as Spain had finally relented to end slavery as a concession to black rebel Cuban armies that had formed to push for independence. In a further move to placate continued unrest on the island, in November 1897, Spain signed automatic charters for Cuba and Puerto Rico, which gave limited home rule governments to both islands. Puerto Rico would gain full representation in the Cortes, the Spanish parliament, and could veto Spanish commercial treaties unfavorable to them while also retaining the rights to set tariffs on imports and exports. In this way, Puerto Ricans were granted a kind of citizenship that allowed self-government grafted on what was left of their Spanish subjecthood. Yet on July 25th, 1898, 8 days after the first meeting of the newly formed Puerto Rican Parliament, U.S. troops arrived in the southern port of Guanica and replaced the Spanish flag with the stars and stripes. This date would be remembered over 50 years later when the United States finally followed through on a project to allow Puerto Ricans to have limited autonomy and self-government. But at the time, it was both the end of Teddy Roosevelt's splendid little war and the beginning of the current quandary over what exactly Puerto Rico's new colonial master would do with the island. Although historians agree that there was no pre-existing plan for designating Puerto Rico's status, there was a general belief that Puerto Rico could be incorporated as a U.S. territory, and probably would be. This led many to assume that it would follow a similar path to statehood as former territories like Florida and Louisiana. At the very least, it would, by acceding to military control, receive, quote, the advantages and blessings of enlightened civilization, end quote, as Puerto Rico's first military governor, Nelson A. Miles, declared 3 days after the landing of Guanica. Because Cuba was so militarized during its wars for independence, the United States decided to allow it national sovereignty, thinking it could still exert considerable control over the economy because of existing business interests and a ready-made set of Cuban consumers who were already buying Ford Model Ts. But although Puerto Rico had experienced anti-Spanish uprisings in the mid-19th century, in 1898 they did not have nearly the same level of armed mobilization present. So the United States held on to it, particularly because of its geographic location, which would provide the United States with a stronghold on the easternmost tip of the Caribbean. The book is Fantasy Island by Ed Morales. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Over at the Thom Hartmann website, thomhartmann.com, we have, the full podcasts and there's just a lot of information, and our newsletter. And the newsletter is extraordinary. It's free. Sue puts it together every day with her stack, and it's just great content. Links to every single article that I talk about on the air, and things that are peripheral to them as well. It's really worth the effort. And then, of course, at HartmannReport.com, there is my daily rant, which is typically incorporated into the program, but it's a written version of it, and that's also something that there's no cost for that at all. So you can check that out as well. Also, we've got a new video up about the dueling memes. If at first you don't succeed, try again, or the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Schumer is going to try to do what Harry Reid did in 2013 by forcing votes. Will it work? We'll see. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls, Jason in Homestead, Florida. Hey, Jason, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I was calling with dealing with the people that refuse to get vaccinated, filling up the hospitals, taking out the economic costs and so forth. And my idea was to simply, fine, we will save you, and if you survive, then you will owe us the cost of you being saved. So in other words, you're going to volunteer to pay it off.
Yeah, it goes. I mean, I get that, Jason, but here's the story. This is a guy named Rob Van Pelt, right? And he lives in Kansas along with his wife, and he went in for a routine procedure last week into the hospital. And sometimes routine procedures go wrong, and what happened was his heart stopped during this procedure. And so they needed an ICU bed for him right away. I don't know what the procedure was, but whatever it was, it stopped his heart. And they didn't have any place in that particular hospital that could see him. They were filled up with COVID. So reading from this story, this is over at rawstory.com. On Friday, medical staff started the process of getting Van Pelt transferred to a hospital in Oklahoma City, but that fell through. Again, because the hospital was filled with COVID. Later in the day, a bed opened up at Essentia Via Christi St. Francis in Wichita, and he was transferred. But with over 90 COVID patients, that hospital had converted its neurological ICU beds, which is what he needed. He needed neurological ICU, but into beds for COVID patients. Van Pelt's wife reported on Sunday that he died. She said, this is what the Star reported, the local newspaper. Summer Van Pelt will never know if anything would have changed medically had he been able to get a bed earlier, but with access to the care he needed, he could have been monitored with the right equipment. She urges people to get vaccinated and wear a mask. How do you deal with that? You know, she lost her 40-year-old husband, not because he got COVID, but because so many idiots refused to get vaccinated that there were no hospital beds in Kansas.
Exactly, but I can't agree with you more, and I feel for that woman. But my point is if you tell them this is what's going to happen, it's encouraging to get vaccinated because most of them aren't going to want to. I mean, can you imagine people that don't want to get vaccinated having to work at a place where you give vaccinations? Most of those people aren't going to want to do that.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you don't want to do that, then go bankrupt because you're going to pay us one way or another the cost of that to save you.
Yeah.
And then people are going to say, wake up and say, okay, well, maybe I'll get the vaccination.
Yeah.
You know, because I hate to put people bankrupt, but, you know, I'm tired of it, too. It comes to a certain point where your heart can only go so far.
It is going to come back around. I mean, it is absolutely going to come back around. There is no way around that.
You know, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you know what I think about this, too, is that this should have been said from the beginning. This should have been the process from the beginning.
Well, from the beginning that the vaccines were available.
If you're not going to get vaccinated, this should have been the consequence. People should be held accountable.
Yep, I'm with you. Jason, thank you for the call. Reggie in Viola, Arkansas. Hey, Reggie, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to give a warning out to all the people. When my kids were little, I used to take them to the toy department and come pick them up when I was done shopping. We live in a little town. The Walmart is in a town of about 1,200 people. Mm-hmm. They're proselytizing in the toy departments, the skinheads are, and trying to get, well, it was my 10-year-old grandson the other day, to join a group of kids and start learning how to shoot and doing all, I mean, it sounded really good, I'm sure. But my son happened to be listening on the other side of the aisle, and he's not as diplomatic as I would have been. He chased the guy out of Walmart.
So this is a white supremacist group trying to recruit kids by saying, we'll teach you how to shoot?
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. In Arkansas.
In the freaking toy department. I mean...
I hope you reported this to the management of the store.
Oh, yes, and I'm telling everyone I know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just sad.
Yeah, it really is. Reggie, thanks for the heads up on that. That's grim hardly begins to describe it. Rob in Rochester, New York. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you doing, Tom?
Good.
Yeah, I just was wondering, you know, you got to chew gum and walk at the same time. I was wondering, what is Biden doing in the DeJoy front? Is he replacing the board quietly, and you planning on getting him out? Because, I mean, 50% electric vehicles isn't going to cut it. We need 100%. We need solar on all the roofs of all the warehouses and distribution centers. We need the
problem we have is that while there is a one-vote Democratic majority on the Postal Board of Governors, which has the sole authority to fire DeJoy, that one of those Democrats, and I think it's the one who's in charge, is a DeJoy boy, is a fan of Louis DeJoy. And it's been a couple of weeks since I reported on this, so I don't have the information right in front of me, but they have financial ties in common. And I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, you know, the guy is being investigated for several different federal crimes. He destroyed millions of dollars, over 300 of these multi-million-dollar sorting machines to flood on the post office. He's now raising the rates. He just took over $100 million contract from the post office for his own personal company, a company that's paying him $2.1 million a year in rent for a space that he's got. I mean, this guy is, you look up corruption in the dictionary, and there's a picture of Louis DeJoy. And the fact that he's still there running the post office is just mind-boggling. Rob, keep on it. Let your elected officials know how outraged you are, because we got to do something about this. Bill in Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Bill, what's up?
You, Tom. Good afternoon.
Bill, I need you to get a little closer to your microphone. I can't hear you.
Okay. There's that better?
That's a whole lot better. What's up?
Okay. Now, what I was calling to say about is this: is I heard you talking. I hear this all the time about how the Republicans are so bad about gerrymandering. Well, the Washington Post has had 2 or 3 articles on this. One, they call Maryland the worst gerrymandered state in the country. They've got 1 Republican congressman in the western part of the state, close to Pittsburgh, and that the way the redistricting is going to go down is pretty well are going to eliminate his House seat for all practical purposes. The same thing's going to happen over in the same thing happened in Illinois. The gentleman over there, I think, is Kinzinger. Adam Kinzinger. So what I'm trying to say is the Republicans don't have any lock on gerrymandering. I'm in North Carolina right now, and I remember in the 80s when Jim Hunt was governor that they had a district that ran basically parallel across the state. It was like 5 miles wide.
Right,
and
3 inches deep, yeah. Now, Bill, I get what you're saying. Let me just put 2 data points out here for you, and particularly, you mentioned North Carolina. North Carolina, I'm not sure about the last election, but I know in the 2016 election, North Carolina, the vote was roughly 50-50 statewide for the House of Representatives, Democrats, at the individual vote level, voting for Democrats or Republicans, and yet North Carolina sent 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats to the House of Representatives. That was the result of gerrymandering. And you're absolutely right. The same thing is happening in Maryland on the Democratic side. There are, however, I believe 5 states now where the gerrymandering is no longer happening, where districts are being drawn by independent commissions.
Yeah, I live in one of them.
Right,
in
Virginia is one of them.
Yeah.
And what you will find is that in every single case, when that is presented as an option, let's just do this and be fair to everybody, it's always the Republicans who are opposed to it, 100% of the time. And in fact, it's typically only when Democrats take over that you end up with fair districts. And there is a debate inside the Democratic Party right now around states like Maryland, where, with these new census numbers, do we fight fire with fire? In other words, do we gerrymander a couple of blue states as badly as they've gerrymandered the red states, just so we don't get wiped out in terms of having a majority in the House? If there was no gerrymandering, Democrats and the House of Representatives reflected the actual votes in the states, there would be about a 40-vote majority in the Democrats' favor in the House of Representatives right now. So, and instead you got a 5 or 6 vote majority. So Democrats are having this debate inside the Democratic Party about whether we do the right thing and be noble and lose control of the House of Representatives, or whether we play the same game the Republicans are playing, at least for the moment, while we're ultimately trying to get to a point where we have something fair. And at least they're having this honest conversation, Bill. The Republican Party is not having an honest conversation about this at all. They know that the only way that they can win is by cheating, and they're trying to do it every way that they possibly can. So, Bill, thanks for the call, and thanks for pointing that out. It's an important conversation that we all need to be having. And but I'm on the side right now of Democrats need to fight fire with fire. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And then in those states where you've gained control, or even with citizen initiative, that's how it happened in Michigan, citizens initiative. The citizens rose up and said no. And welcome back. Mike in Reno, Nevada. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Oh, Tom, I just want to thank you so much for your book, Screwed, and a little story about how your book has brought 3 very old friends together. And
really? I wrote that book 15 years ago. I still think it's one of my best books, but
it is amazing. And anyway, 3 old friends who are very politically diverse. I'm the lefty in the group. We got a righty and then a guy who claims he's in the middle. and we get together every Wednesday on a conference call and found ourselves talking over each other and sometimes getting very heated. I sent them each a copy of Screwed, and Tom, that book has brought the temperature of the room down, and now we discuss, and I just can't thank you enough.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mike.
I got to say, any listeners out there who have not, it's a 15-year-old book, but it is germane today.
Oh, yeah. It's, I mean, no, the principles, the details of what was going on 15 years ago, are not all that different from today, but that book really starts back with Rene Descartes and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, back in the 1634s.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Anyway, I again, thank you so very much, and just want to echo Kenyatta, who called earlier, your discussion on emotions the other day and what's going on in the world right now. Really appreciated. I encourage every man in the world to say to another man, I love you, no matter how politically different you are. It will take the temperature down.
Yeah, and we're all just people here, and we're all having our own struggles, our own difficult times.
Indeed, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, nice to hear from you. Johan in Los Angeles. Hey, Johan, what's up?
Yeah, try to add on from the yesterday's program that you talked about the nuclear waste in the Pacific coastline. Here's a solar panel waste. You'll be like 80 million tons of solar waste project by 2050.
But it's not radioactive.
That's the wind turbines. That's radioactive. Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
From the MIT, from wind turbines. Yeah.
Wind turbines are not radioactive.
It says in the MIT research here, 6.1 million pounds of radioactive were waste created in 2012, something like that. Yeah.
What was that, from the electricity used to make them or something? Because there's nothing.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
There's nothing radioactive in a solar power panel or a wind panel. If you're saying that electricity from a nuclear power plant was used to make one, you could say that of anything. I think that's a pretty disingenuous argument, Johan, respectfully.
Well, here is from the silicon perspective, what they made with the nitrogen trifluoride, sulfur hexafluoride, most greenhouse,
there's some fairly toxic chemicals in there, but they're not going to be radioactive for a million years. Johan, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So we have over at HartmannReport.com my daily rant, which you can find there. And over at ThomHartmann.com, we have the free newsletter, which lists every single website, gives you hot links right out to every single website for every single story that I talk about throughout the program during the course of the day. And then, of course, also at ThomHartmann.com, we've got our weekly video that we put up. And the one this week is kind of mind-boggling. It turns out, if you remember back when Anthony Kennedy resigned from the U.S. Supreme Court right after Trump made remarks about his son Justin, who had signed off on $1 billion worth of loans from Deutsche Bank to Donald Trump, Kennedy resigned, and Brett Kavanaugh was nominated by Trump. And Christine Blasey Ford said he was, essentially guilty of sexual assault. All kinds of tips went to the FBI, and we have just found out what happened to those tips. It's all over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's up?
Hi, I just wanted to let you know about a couple of researchers in a British university in the past year or so, I guess. were working on the idea of cloud seeding and the problems with that. And they came up with a different idea of cloud zapping. And what they would do is send a little drone up, and it would zap that little tiny cloud, and the electrons in it, whether they were positive or negative, they would bond together with other little positive or negative ions and make fat raindrops, and it would rain. And so they tested it in Dubai, which is probably one of the hottest, driest cities on the planet, and it rained real nice.
Oh, yeah, I saw a news report about that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, you know, with all the fires going out west, maybe we could test that idea out on a little teeny cloud and say, can you rain just a little over here?
The problem is that then when that cloud, which was originally supposed to drop its rain not on California but on Utah, gets to Utah, it's no longer a cloud.
Well, Utah's got its own clouds too. I mean, we're not going to use all of them, you know.
Okay.
Like
I'm just always wary of messing with Mother Nature, but I get what you're saying, Sandra. Sandra, thank you for the call. It's you know, a little bit of geeky science for us today. Alan, speaking of geeky science, you want to talk about maglev trains, Alan in Michigan?
Yes. I wanted to say, Tom, that I grew up, I'm 10 years older than you. I grew up in the Detroit area. My father was a pipe fitter, Great Lake Steel, so our backgrounds are similar. But 50 years ago, I moved to Houghton, Michigan, and went to
Which is a beautiful town.
And I said, I'll always be able to get a drink of water. But aside, the reason I called was 2 weeks ago, you had a caller about maglev trains, and it reflected the maglevs similar to Japan, where they lifted about a quarter inch, and the maximum weight they can handle in a car is the weight of the people. But there's a book that's about 20 years old called Maglev 2000, and they talk about lifting the cars up about 4 inches, and they could put 2 semi-trailers in one car, and they could run the overhead rails on the expressways, and they could move those semi-trailers across the country at 300 miles an hour.
Wow.
And so that's never really caught on, but they were also talking about passenger trains being on the same system. And so I was fascinated with the book, but I don't know why the technology has never really caught on.
I don't either. I would be interested in how efficient it is. Radiation decays according to what's called the reciprocal of the square law. Every time you double the distance, you square the decrease in energy. So radiation decays very rapidly over space. And so if you're pushing 4 inches, it's going to take at least exponentially more energy to produce that levitation than you would have at a ½ inch or a quarter inch. But that's pretty much the limit of my engineering knowledge in that regard. And that may even be wrong. I mean, don't take it to the bank. But Alan, you raise an interesting question. Thank you. Thank you for the call. Scott in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hi, Tom. First-time caller, long-time listener here.
Thank you.
Real quick, I wanted to just touch on, you have a gamer or somebody that works in the game industry that calls in. I was talking earlier today about MOBA games being a microcosm of social interaction. I kind of wanted to extrapolate that to say that's actually all of the Internet, especially social media.
Good point.
So, but anyway, what I wanted to say is I thought recently that we might want to take advantage of the pandemic to address the issue of tipping resulting in lower wages for host staff and kind of fix that minimum wage problem. In Washington here, we have host staff that are paid a pretty fair wage, looks like about $14.50 across the state on average. And tipping is still done here, like at a cannabis store that we frequent nearby. At that store, they take all the money, they put it into a jar, and then at the end of the day, they distribute it to the different people that are employed there. What I thought is if a business is doing something like that, if they claim that the tips are given to the entity of the business instead of them, it might start a legal battle, and we could use that as precedent for other states.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd have to dig into that a little deeper. Scott, give me a shout next week, and we'll do a more of a deep dive on that. I'm just out of time now. Hey, special thanks to the people who really put this program together every day, Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Nigel Peacock helps us, Jamie and everybody else who works on, and Joyce Nance, the Hammer, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick White, Jerry Lynn Halbert, who put together our podcast. They're brilliant. Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, our engineer, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabberwocky, Jay LeBlanc, Carno Herrera, and Carnivore. Thank you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Get out there, get active, tag You're It, and I'll see you on Monday.
Tick, tick, tick.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!